Righto, welcome back to part 2 on pulsing. Today in this video we're going to be talking about the average value pulsing feature with Tetrix. So what is our average value pulsing, you might be asking? Well, I'm reading from the book here, but essentially average value pulsing is a variant of pulsing with a particularity that the power source will always maintain the preset amperage value. In this case we've got 100 amps. This makes this method especially suitable for welding according to a welding procedure specification. So this sort of helps to mitigate the, the peculiarities of pulsing. And I touched on that on the last video, which is probably easy to explain and maybe even draw, if I can get the old drawing going today, is that if you've got a, see if I can actually draw this in a way which is relative to the camera. Here we go. So if you've got a, just say a waveform where you've got a pulse which goes high for a period of time, then it goes low for a short amount, then it goes high, low. If this is, say, 100 and that is 50, then what the effective average current is somewhere in between here. Like it could be like in a range. It's a bit fuzzy, you wouldn't know until you start calculating the time that it's low versus the time that it's high, and then you'll sort of get a bit of an idea. What average value pulsing does is you tell it what you want the frequency to be. So the frequency is from there to there. So the time frame that it takes to complete one pulse. And you tell it what you want the peak to be as a percentage. So essentially, not a percentage, yeah, well actually it is a percentage. So in average value pulsing you would make that number, let's just say 75. You would tell the machine that you want the peak amperage to be 100. The base current is calculated by the machine, and you choose the frequency in hertz, which is there to there. So if you say you want 1 hertz, it would do this in 1 second. You would target 75 amps, you would go up to 100, and it would work out the rest of the details so that you get that number as opposed to that fuzzy range that you would otherwise have to sort of calculate and work to. So that's average value pulsing. So what's that mean on the machine? Let's have a look. Moving the camera. Machine's gone to sleep, we'll wake her up. So average value pulsing. So in this case we've set the machine to 100 amps. In this case we'll just bump it down to 75 just so it matches our example we drew. The other variables that are opened up on this machine with this average value pulsing setting is, we know it's 75 amps. Our peak is measured as a percentage of the average value. So in this case, if my Saturday afternoon maths is all good, it'd be 125% of 75. No, it'd be 130. 33-ish. So that would give us a peak of roughly 100 amps like we calculated. And the next thing we are calculating is, worth mentioning, base current doesn't apply in this case. It gives you that option because on some torches you can push the secondary button and you could bump down to a lower amperage. But for this purpose, not required. Downslope end current, post flow, not required. Balance. So balance relates to the amount of time that your pulse, well they call it the IPL, the pulse value, works at. So in this case, if you want the balance of time, 20% of the time it will be on that 133% peak. So back to our picture. We're on the lean here, but you get the idea. 20% of the time it will be up there. The remainder of the time, based off the frequency that we're choosing, it will be in the base. So it goes without saying, the more time you spend on a peak, the higher your peak, so the higher this number is, the more time you'll need to spend on a base to get to that average, because you're moving further away from that number. Hopefully, I'm not the best at explaining this, but yeah, hopefully that makes sense. An average is, by example, it's an average. So if you have a high number, you need a low number to sort of average that out. So that's our balance percentage, and our frequency in this case we've got set to 1.0, which is 1 Hertz. And if you're wondering what the unit of measure is, it's that button which illuminates there, Hertz, HZ. So yeah, also worth mentioning that when you're doing average value pulsing, when you've set your defined amperage that you want to work to, and you've got your pulse frequency, if it was 100, you're essentially 100%, you're essentially not pulsing. Actually, no, I'll lie. Yeah, if it was 100%, you wouldn't be pulsing. If it was in the less than 100 range, then it's actually a smaller percent of time that you're spending on the peak than becomes the base. So in that instance, when we're in the low number, let's just say we're at 50% of our peak, the balance relates to what amount of time. If 75 is what we're aiming for, and our pulse value is 50% of that, then when we change our balance, we're actually changing the low current state time that it's on, not the high current state. So that can be used to your advantage if you want to define a low current state as opposed to a high current state when it comes to choosing your pulse parameters. So, yeah, hopefully that made a bit of sense. It's a bit hard to get your head around, and it's a bit weird in the way it's been designed. But the way I think of it, looking at our examples, is if you want to target 75 amps into the job, you tell it how long you want it to be high versus low. If you want an equal distribution, it would be 50% balance, so 50% of at the high pulse, 50% at the low pulse. From there, you choose your frequency, how long you want it to go through one pulse cycle, and the base current and the base time will be calculated for you to give you that number. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Bit of a head scratcher. Took me a bit of time to get my head around it, but hopefully it helps people to understand how it could be used to your advantage. So yeah, enjoy. See you next time.